So this is the SmartPro Air X. I was actually introduced to it last year at MJSA, was the first time I saw this. And I got to play with it a little bit. And one of the things too that I kind of like about it is that they have been fairly open, the maker SmartPro, they've actually been fairly open to feedback and suggestions. So as I tested it out, there were a couple things that I came across that I was like, well, it doesn't have enough power here, it doesn't have enough power there, or maybe this needs to be tweaked. And they're working on those tweaks. You know, they've already come out with a second version of it that had more torque and another hand piece that had a little bit of a harder strike. So they are continuing to improve it, which is nice because it still needs some, right? The very first question that people are going to ask me, and it comes out of their mouth every time, is how does this compare to a GRS? It doesn't. All right, it just does not compare. They are two different machines altogether. The GRS machine, you'll note, has like a great big old compressor that it needs. This one has a little tiny compressor inside. And because of that, you're not going to have the same kind of power and torque that you would have with that bigger compressor with higher pressure. Is it enough? Yes. And at first, when I very first started working with it, I was like, yeah, no, there's no way. There's no way I like this machine because I've already been trained on it and I've already done thousands of hours on a GRS machine. So when you go from that to something like this, and again, there's just no comparison, but I had to kind of stop and sit back and be like, okay, but what can it do? And quite honestly, I was still able to do everything that I did with my GRS with this machine. I just had to learn how to hold things differently and to go maybe a little bit slower, or maybe I had to make a couple passes. So it can still do what I need it to do. I can still get beautiful flare cuts. I still cut my seats. I still do my pave setting. I still do my bead setting. I still do my prong setting and my bezel setting and my bright cutting. It just takes a little bit of a different touch when it comes to working with it. So if this is a machine that you start with, it's fantastic. It's like $1,000, especially if you do it at the show from Guess Wine, which is where I'm at this for the show. They have it on sale for $1,000. And not only does it have the pneumatic engraving, but then it also has a micromotor. And again, the micromotor doesn't have some of the same kind of torque as I would expect with some other machines that are higher end, but you're also going to pay a lot higher price for those machines as well. And if you have a studio that's smaller and you don't have room for both a micromotor and an engraving machine and your flex shaft and all of your accessories, then this is still a really good option. So I have another studio. I've got my main studio where I teach classes and everything like that, but then I have a second studio and I don't have much space in that one at all. And this is a perfect machine, and this is where, at that studio, that's where my SmartPro lives. And actually I have one in both studios, so I have two of them, right? So I do have a few different things. Let's talk about the micromotor first. All right, we'll just get that part done. So the micromotor, I'm gonna zoom this out just a bit. Here we go. Okay, so it's a brush type motor, similar looks to other micromotors that you can get brush type. What does that mean? That means here in the end of this, if I open this up, just like your flex shaft, you have brushes, okay? And like a lot of machines, you have what are called brushes. They don't look a thing like brushes. I don't know why they're called brushes, but there's one right here and one right here. And that just means that you're going to have to maintain this a little bit better, or, you know, when you're working with it. It comes with, and I don't see them in here, but it does come with a set of replacement brushes. So you should have a lot of working time with these. Also notice that we've got some vent holes here. That means that you need to keep these areas clean. So every now and then, you know, just blow it out or get a can of air and blow that out, because as you get dust and things like that in there, those can get into your machine and it's going to cause some issues. It's going to cause it to overheat or whatever else. So you want to be aware of that, okay? Am I turning this the right way? Maybe? You know, here I try to show you all the good stuff and make more work for myself. And I don't think I have that aligned right. Okay, there we go. So it will come with the brushes. Okay, so what does it come with? Good question. Obviously, it comes with your handpiece. It comes with a handpiece cradle, which you should always use. Okay, it keeps it from rolling and falling. You drop this on the ground, you can knock it out of alignment, you can ruin it, and then you just end up buying a new one. It will come with 6 collets like this for your gravers. It will also come with 6 gravers, but they're not any shape or size that I would ever use. So you can reshape them, but they're really small. So it might be okay for some of the smaller things that you might do. But for me, I just used my GRS gravers. They do need to be the round, so I use the C-Max gravers. So, because they, like I said, the way that these collets are, you really need kind of the round ones. Sometimes you can. You might have to alter a little bit the shape of the shank on that, which is not a big deal either. Like, you can round it out. That's one of the things that I've done, is I've rounded mine out. This one was a C-grave, or a C-Max graver that I used on this one. But yeah, you can round it out, or you can just reshape it just a little bit so that it's a little narrower, more square-like, and then it will fit in. Okay, so it'll come with the 6 gravers, it'll come with your 6 collets. It also is going to come with your handpiece. In addition to your handpiece, you are also, and I don't have them here, but it will come with a little hammer that you can change out. So you can actually change how hard this is going to hit. So it comes with 2 what we call hammers. I'll open this up here. It's a little tight at first. There we go. Okay, and I want to be really careful because there is a spring in here. And I've already been on my knees looking for the spring. Okay, so here we go. Here's my spring. Here's my hammer. Okay, so it comes with a second piece that right there. There we go. There's the spring, there's the hammer. So there's a second piece that it will come with that you can change out, and that will allow you to give either a stronger hit or a lighter hit. So if I want it, and quite honestly, I put the stronger one in and I never change it. I just learned to use a lighter touch when I am engraving items. Okay, but sometimes maybe you want a lighter one, and so it's that easy to switch out. Okay, so then let me get this tightened back up. I also found that if I don't get this all the way tight, see how there's that gap there? That's going to allow air to get out, and it's going to really lighten my strokes and my hits as well. So you want to be aware of that I want to make sure that this is closed up nice and tight. And we're almost there. There we go. So notice that right now it's closed. So I want to make sure of that. Okay. When it comes to operating the machine, let me move some of this stuff here really quick. I'm going to bring this guy over here so you guys can see it a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so we have a few options. We can go from the engraver to the handpiece, so just by switching right here, okay? And then I can go forward or reverse if I'm on my handpiece for the rotary handpiece, that micromotor part, okay? So it's really easy to switch between engraving and drilling or polishing, all right? So that makes that part easy. Then, as far as the speed goes, quite honestly, I have not figured out what their numbers are because they don't seem to really correlate to, it's not like if I turn this on that it's, okay, first of all, right now I've got it on the micromotor and it just turned on. So let me show you something really quick. But 27, well, what is that? Is that 2,700 RPM or is that 27,000? I haven't quite figured that out, but I know my machines enough that if I know what they sound like. If it's going too fast, I'm going to burn out my burrs. And you never should run your stuff all the way fast. I never have had a need for that. This will actually go up to, I think, 30,000 RPM. Okay, as a jeweler, when you have an accessory, more often than not, it will tell you what your max speed is. This one's max 5,000. So quite honestly, I'm going to turn this up to a 5, but I don't think that that's really that's not quite fast enough, I don't think. So you would have to play around with it just a little bit, but you'll get a feel for it pretty quick. Now, it's also very, very important that if something gives you a speed right here, like this max 5,000, don't go above that speed. All right, the reason for that is if I were to put this in here, so this, it happens to be a diamond shaping wheel, but if I were to put this in here, and notice that it's not really supported underneath. Like, yeah, it has that little bit of a support, but like some of them are, this one's not. There are some that have like a full plate underneath it that's gonna support it a little bit more, but I have actually had these things blow up. Like, no, yeah, they totally disintegrate and they just blow up. So you wanna be, and if it's going at 50, 30,000 RPM, no, it's the spinning. It's the spinning. It's the force of the spinning that causes it to break apart. It can't handle that kind of force. I mean, think about the G forces you've put on that thing. It can't do it. And so it will actually blow up. So that would be one thing. The other thing that happens if you're spinning too fast and you have something that's a little larger on the top here like that, if you give it a little bit of pressure and it's spinning that quickly, it will bend that mandrel, and then the force of it will cause the mandrel to basically do a 90-degree bend, and now you have this big hammer thing spinning around, again, at like 30,000 RPM. No, it's so bad. So you wanna make sure that you pay attention because they've already gone through and they've tested this and said, do not take this above 5,000 RPM. As a jeweler, the majority of my stuff stops at about 10 to 20,000 RPM. Very few items go above 20,000 RPM. And the 20,000 RPM ones are going to be more like a polishing buff as the end of that, or even like a burr, a drilling burr, right, for a stone setting or something like that. But any of these bigger ones, rarely are you going to see anything like this go above 10,000 RPM. Right? So just pay attention to that. And it wasn't something that nobody ever told me that. It wasn't until I started working with Fordham and doing their videos that I actually got educated on some of this and then started to see some of the things. Right. So, okay, with your flex shaft, okay, so, and it depends, right? Because it depends on which machine you have. Let's say that I'm working with an SR motor. That's the typical one that most people have in their studio. That one is gonna go up to 18,000 RPM. That's the one that has the reverse and the forward, right? 18,000 RPM. So if I'm pushing my pedal, right, you don't see. You have no visual clue on that as to what you have. So you kind of have to learn, right? Or you can get a tabletop control unit. And then even then the tabletop control units just show you a range. They never give you a number. And that's because it can be worked with multiple machines. Well, the SR goes up to 18,000, the TX goes to 15,000, and the LX goes to 5,000 RPM. So each one of those, if we have a range, you just take that range and you divide it. Okay, and you say, okay, well, if I've got 18,000 divided by 6 sections, that gives me 3,000 for each section, right? Whatever. Does that make sense? So that's how you would do that. Most of the micromotors, not all, but most of the micromotors will have a digital readout. The ones that don't, again, they have that range, and then you just need to know. So if I'm working with a 1070 micromotor, that one's gonna be the brush type. That's gonna go up to about 30,000 RPM. So again, if I have 6 sections and I'm at 30,000, that, 6 divided by, or 30 divided by 6, what does that give me? Okay, so that's how you would kind of figure out where to put your controller. On this one, like I said, this one goes up to 99. Well, I know I don't go to 99,000 RPM. I know I don't go up to 990 RPM. So is this a percentage? You know what I mean? So that's why I said this one's not exactly clear on that. But as a jeweler and somebody who's been making jewelry, I know enough to know that, oh, this isn't quite fast enough. I'll give it a little more. Oh, that's too much, and I'll back it off a bit. And so you kind of get the feel for it as you're working with it. And I would dare say that most of you guys already have started to get a feel for that. If not, you do really quickly as you work with an item, okay? So that would be one thing. Now, notice here, so right now it says that I'm on a foot switch. What I can do is I can turn this all the way down this way and then take it back up to here. And now notice that that foot switch went off. So now this time when I turn this back on, it will automatically run this. And I don't know if you guys can hear this or not. Okay. So, and it's super smooth. Like you don't feel it. That's the lovely thing about a micromotor. Okay, when you think of a flex shaft, you've got your little pendant motor that hangs up here, right? And then you've got your shaft, and then you have your handpiece. This is your pendant shaft. That's why it's called a micromotor. Everything that's in that motor up here is in here. And they're super soft and supple. That's lovely because then you get these really pliable cords. So they're really easy to use. More often than not, I'm using it like a pen, especially if I'm drilling, then I'm gonna use it more like a pen here. If I'm polishing, then I'm gonna hold like this, right? And that way I can bring it and I can take it to my piece that I'm polishing. So it makes it really easy to hold. Yeah, a lot more control, and micromotors are lovely. I think every studio needs a micromotor. That does not negate my need for my flex shafts. I have 7 of those too. I've got like 6 micromotors and I've got 7 flex shafts, which you don't need, right? Because unless you're teaching classes like I do, then you need them, right? But I would still highly suggest, if you are able, a flex shaft and a micromotor. The reason is micromotors very rarely, unless you get into something like the Badecos, they're not going to have the torque. Okay, they're not going to have as much torque as what you're going to have with a flex shaft. You're going to have more power there. You're going to have better speed and more control and a lighter feel with a micromotor. There's going to be good benefits for both of them. If you can only afford one, look at your cost and look at your space. See which one works well for you. For me, when I got started, that meant I did a flex shaft. So that's what I did. And it came with all the different accessories, which you won't use half of, but it came with them and you feel like you're getting a really good deal. And I have now found uses for most of those accessories. You know, you have to get in and play with them. So there's trade-offs there, right? A micromotor is definitely going to be more expensive because all of that big machinery now has to fit into here. So it's a more precision machine, right? So, good question. Yes. And every time you get a micromotor or a quick change handpiece, it doesn't matter if it's a quick change handpiece for your flex shaft or a micromotor, they are always going to have something in here. This is a blank. Okay, and what that is there's just the mandrel itself. There's no accessory to it or anything like that. It is so important, and I cannot stress this enough, that you always leave something inside your micromotor, inside your quick change as well. Yes, the reason for that is because there's a collet in here. And if you close this without something in there, you can actually put that collet out of shape. Okay, so it is extremely important that you always have something in here. So if I don't have my blank, like within hand's reach, then I just leave whatever accessory I can inside of it. Okay, now this one is a 3/32. So this is what we consider a quick change in our jewelry industry, the 3/32 inch, which is like 2.35 millimeters, right? Okay, so this is pretty standard. Like you can buy drill bits, you can buy accessories, your polished and stuff like that, or polishing accessories, your burrs, all of those are gonna mostly come with that. I also have, and this one did not have that ability, but some of my others, like my Fordham micromotors, I will actually change out the collet and put in a 1/8 inch collet to make it bigger. So now I can use the Fordham accessories, but if I try to stick a 3/32 inch, then it's too big. So what I use is a collet adapter. So it will take it and it will put, it just fits. It's a little sleeve that will fit through Fordham or Micro Tools or, really any of the places, Rio, Guess Wine, Stoller, any of them will have them. You just type in collet adapter and you need to know which reduction you're going to. So in my studio, I have 1/8 inch collets in my micromotors. So I always know I need to go from 1/8 inch to a 3/32, or I might need to go from a 1/8 inch to a 1/16, because I'll use dental burrs sometimes on some of the things that I want to do. So you can actually get those collet reducers for that as well, right? So you have a number of options. This one, you're at a 3/32, okay? All right, I'm gonna put that in the cradle. So this now I can either use by the foot or by hand, either way. But to switch it, you just bring it all the way up here and you can hear that it's clicking, right? So, and it's gonna do the same thing, but it's telling me that this is on the micromotor. And here, pretty quick, if I switch this, now I can do the engraver, but I do the same thing here. So right now it's on the foot switch, so if I do this, nothing happens here until I push my foot pedal. Okay, and now if I want to do it just by hand, okay, so you have that ability to either do it by hand or by foot, which is kind of cool, right? I prefer having the control by my foot, but sometimes I may want it to just run at a certain speed for me, and so I might just say, okay, let's just put it there, and now it's ready to go whenever I'm ready to go. So you have the option, but I find the majority of the time I'm working with my foot pedal. I like the ability to stop when I need to. Okay, so let's talk now then. Well, first of all, any questions on the micromotor part? I covered a lot more than just this one, but hopefully that at least gave you some good information to think about. Okay, so let's talk then about the portion for our engraving. There is a compressor in here. But again, like I said, you consider the compressors that we use for all the other machines. If I'm on a Lindsay or if I'm on the GRS system, we're using a big old compressor. It's loud, it's bulky, and it also gives me a lot of pressure. This one is in here. It's not that loud. So let's, okay, wait, here. There you can hear the compressor, right? It's not bad. But it also is working like full force, and it's not going to give me as much pressure. Where I run into problems with this one, my studio that's in the woods is at 9,000 feet. Okay, it doesn't get up to pressure as well up there. So I find that I have a little harder time with my engraving unit getting deep and powerful at 9,000 feet. I live at 4,600 feet, and it does just fine at 4,600 feet. So you'll have to keep in mind that elevation may be an issue, especially if you're going to be high up in the mountains, which most people aren't, right? But it is something that I found inadvertently testing it while I was at the cabin. I mean, who else would have thought, oh, let's take it at 9,000 feet and test this out? That's not a normal thing unless you live there, right? And very few people do. So that's something to think about. Now, the collets that are in this are what we would consider a quick change collet, okay? And that's where you mount your engraver, or your graver, not engraver, I'm the engraver. So you mount, please don't mount me into this. That could be so bad in so many ways. All right, so anyway. So mounting your graver in one of these makes it so that you can have several of them ready to go with different geometries cut onto them, and then you can just pop one out, pop the next one in, pop it out, pop the next one in. And so I like to have as many of these as possible. It comes with 6 of them, right? And even in my studio at home, I've got 4 of mine mounted. I have 2 extras that are still waiting for whatever geometry of graver I want to have, okay? And then you would sharpen your gravers the same way that you do any gravers. So typically that's done either with like a graver hone type of system, like a hone, you know, where you've got the different plates and you can shape your graver heads and faces that way, or you can always do it by hand using I'm just done. It's like the end of the day. But using the diamond shaping discs. All right, so you have a number of ways that you can do these. And like I said, I do like to buy the C-Max ones from GRS because then it's already round and I know that it's going to fit. And all I have to do is install it, tighten it up, and then give my shape of whatever I'm going to do, right? Was that? I don't know if they have them in like here to walk away with, but Guess Wine does have them. Yeah, and then they can just put, if you want, they could put the order in and ship it right to you. Like, and they're just in Connecticut, right? Yeah, they're in Connecticut, so they're not, or Rhode Island. I don't know. They're not very far away, so it would get to you pretty quickly. But yeah, so I would check with them. These are the they're identa is what they are. Yeah, identa. And so there's three of them. So you've got the coarse, the medium, and the fine. And some people only get the coarse and fine. So the coarse is going to be so that you can shape your graver, and then you would jump over to the fine to give it that nice high polish. Right? Okay. So when it comes to doing this, so I've got this already on my foot pedal. I'm going to turn up my speed here. Okay, so one of the things that I have found with this machine, and this is where it really will kind of differ with the GRS machine too. When I push my pedal, my power is on. Like it just is on, and my speed is my speed. So I can like barely push on the pedal, but it still is going to give me the same hit. So my strength, one of the things when I very first tested it, like I brought it into my piece. Let's zoom in on this. Yes.
What motion is the graver making?
Back and forth. It's a reciprocal piece. Yeah, it's like a hammer, right?
So the hammer piece for the Fordham wouldn't be as delicate as that.
The hammer hand piece for your Fordham is going to work a little differently because if I push lightly on my pedal, it's going to start off kind of slow. And then as I push harder on my pedal, it's going to get faster. This one, the speed is the speed pretty much, and the hit is the hit. So, like,
Press harder, it hits harder.
yeah. So on this one of the things that I noticed, like, I'm used to taking, if I'm working with my GRS, and I come in here, and I don't have my microscope, guys, so don't be expecting anything lovely, and this moves like this. So, hot glue. Yep, hot glue. And notice that there's blue tape here. So that makes it so that I can pop it off easy and I don't have hot glue all over the back of my piece. Yeah. Yeah, you could do it in the pitch, you can do it in the Thermalock, you can do it on all of those. My Thermalock sticks to my metal, right? So even on my Thermalock, I'll put the tape on the back of my piece and stick it into the Thermalock. And that way less of the Thermalock sticks to my piece, right? So I always put the tape on because no, I put the wood, I put the hot glue. The tape is on the back of my piece. I tape the back side of my copper. What? No, just painter's tape. It's just regular old painter's tape. And so I just put it on the back of my copper piece and then I just stick it on here. So I heat up the glue with I just have a heat gun and I just heat it up and then I pop it in. And it holds it really well.
So you don't have to put it in the freezer, you don't have to put it in hot water.
Nope. So when I'm done with this, I'll take my heat gun, warm it back up, and I'll just stick my fingernail right here and I'll just pop it up and then it'll just come right off. And the glue may stick to my tape, but it's not going to stick to my piece. And then if all I have to do is just pull the tape out, throw it away.
So make sure the whole back is
That's what I do. Yeah. Yeah, I'm full of those. If you want little tips, I'll give you little tips. All right. So one of the things that I found is that when I came in here to do this, I noticed that it kind of hit hard right off the bat. Okay. And this one wasn't too bad because now I've got a feel for it. Like I have a feel for the machine. I know how to use this machine now. So what was happening though is it would come in here and I would kind of go and it would just kind of run away from me because it was hitting so hard and I wasn't prepared for that. And so now I know that it's going to hit hard. Like you can see, you can't even see where I did it. I can't see either. I need my microscope. All right. So, but let's say I'll come back into this part right here. So what I'm using right now is a flat graver. Okay. So that's what I have.
GRS ball.
Yes, this is a GRS ball. This is a microblock, the GRS microblock. And I typically wouldn't engrave on a GRS microblock because it's so small. Like I like the fact that it is small, but it's harder to hold my big pieces. There we go.
So this is company made a block.
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, not that I'm aware of. But anyway, so you guys can start to see, and you see how nice that cut is? When I very first started, it wasn't that nice. It was like, okay, and that was even something that I said in my article that I wrote for MJSA, is that we have kind of a hit. And so because of that, I was seeing some of the lines. And even after I get really good control, now I'm only at a 30 right here on my machine. What does that equate to? I'm not totally sure. I just know that I would probably take this up a little bit more. As I get faster, the hit becomes softer, okay? Because it can't pull back and go forward with enough force. Like it doesn't have enough time to build up that force. Does that make sense? So as you go faster, you go slower, but I want that speed to make it smoother too. So you have to kind of figure out and work that balance. And that just takes time. And it takes time sitting here, playing with it, making mistakes. One of the things that I found is that I kept skittering off. Okay, you already have like that propensity with your engraving anyway, as you're pushing, because you're giving force. And then if you ever notice, like if you're tilted but not quite enough, then it hits that point and it just goes zoop, and there's your piece is toast, right? Or you get to do a lot of burnishing or filing and clean up, right? No. So it's apples and oranges when you're talking hand push to pneumatic engraving. So with this though, it's kind of a combination of both, because now what I'm gonna do, because I know that this machine has that propensity to kind of push me, so what I want is the feel that I'm after. I need some pressure, oppositional pressure, as I push, but you have to kind of control it because I've got that power from behind, but I'm still trying to dig in enough that I have the oppositional pressure like what I would have if I were hand pushing. If that makes any sense at all. I know that doesn't almost sounds counterintuitive, but that I would say this machine more so than my GRS machine or the Lindsay or anything like that. This one I have to control more like I am hand pushing.
Have you done the hand pushing in the beginning?
Not in the beginning. So I've done hand pushing only a little bit, and obviously I learned with pneumatic, and I prefer pneumatic,
So hard.
the hand. Yeah. Well, just because, no, and it's not that it's hard. I mean, it's definitely different. It's a different feel because it's all you, right? But I also happen to know I have a sharp graver, and I've skittered with sharp gravers with my pneumatic. I don't want to skitter with that with the hand push because that goes right into your hand. So, so I have not done much hand pushing. It's definitely a different technique than pneumatic engraving, right? So there is the difference there. The biggest learning curve that I still have to figure out is when I make tight curves. So if I'm doing lettering, okay, so here I did the A, and this A actually turned out beautiful. I mean, you can see that that's a beautiful bright cut, right? That's a nice flare cut right there. And I don't have the skitter lines or anything, but again, it's because I know the machine now. I figured out how to do it. But when I was very first doing it, and as a matter of fact, even in the article, I sent in pictures where I zoomed in really, really close to like this little section right here on the A where it curves around. And that's where you're gonna see as I come around, okay? So part of it is technique.
So if you do that while you're working on it, can you smooth it out?
Yes,
by hand?
yes, yeah. And so that was one of the things that I did a lot. So I would get in there and I would have the little lines, right? And then I would just come back and I would push it. I would just hand push that and kind of clean that up a little bit. So there's two things that were happening. One, I've got this hit that comes from this machine that's a little bit harder and it's a little slower. So with the GRS, I might have the same power of this, but I have a higher speed, which is gonna smooth that out a little bit more. So this one's a little bit more jittery or staccato, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is going to be your technique. When you are engraving, don't engrave up here like this, right? Engrave down here where you're comfortable, first of all. But second of all, don't do what we call chicken winging. None of this. There's never any of this. Your hand never does anything. This is the stupid hand. All this hand ever does is sits right here. And then what this hand does is he's the smart hand. He's the mover, right? So if I put this on here, I cannot see what I'm doing. This is the fun part of getting old. So if I'm going to put this here, and I'm going to come here, I'm going to lock my wrist, right? So this right here, there we go. And let's go. That's how I want my wrist, period. I don't want my wrist to move. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my piece to my wrist, to my graver, to my locked in position. Okay, so arm needs to stay locked in right here, wrist needs to stay locked right here, and that's how you get away from that. If you start seeing a lot of that jitteriness behind you, or you got your drag lines, check your positioning. Check your arm. Is it out? Are you trying to bring that graver around? You should never bring your graver around. You just hold your dumb guy dumb. He just stays. And then the other hand is the one that brings the metal to you to be cut. And that is probably the biggest lesson that I have learned in engraving, period. And it's even more noticeable on this machine when I'm off. And that's my first thing. So if I'm starting to see jittery lines, my very first thing is I'm going to be like, okay, how did I hold things? And more often than not, I've got my arm starting to come up. I'm starting to chicken wing it, or I've let my wrist go. Okay, so those are going to be your big things. I was unprepared for the power. So don't jump into one of your pieces that you're just doing your final stuff. If you're going to do this machine, practice. Yep. So what I do is I just print up the little practice plates. Okay, whether you do that with a rub method, you draw it on, you laser print it, whatever you want to do, however you want to get your pattern on there, or even just start doing lines. Right? Just scribe a few lines and do your lines, because you're going to porpoise again. If you've ever learned on the other machines, you might porpoise. You know what porpoising is, right? Porpoising is when you go up and down. So as you're engraving, your goal is to have a nice, thin, even line the whole way through. But when I learned, some people maybe are better than me, you're digging in and you're like, okay, pull it back up, because you're digging in and you're all back up. And that's called porpoising. So porpoise is... new term for y'all. Worth the price of admission. So that would be the thing that I would suggest. And really it comes down to with engraving. You guys, engraving is the hardest thing I have ever learned when it comes to jewelry. And I know a lot of jewelry techniques. It's the one that has kicked my butt the most. You have to spend the hours, and that's the only thing. It's all muscle, and you'll start to figure it out. And you guys are welcome to come up and try this out. And I don't care about the plates. You can destroy the plates. I can resand them. It's not a problem. So feel free, come up and try it out, because you won't know. I mean, I can tell you what I feel, what I experience, but until you actually play with it, it's just different.
You're going to get one engraving machine.
Okay, that comes down to, is cost an issue, is space an issue, right? Cost is no issue, then you might as well just go ahead and get the GRS. Why wouldn't you?
How much is the GRS?
So so to give you an idea, the GRS box itself, just the graver, like the G8, I want to say is like $1,800 to $2,000. But then you have to buy your hand pieces. And it doesn't come with a micromotor. It doesn't come with any accessories. So you have to buy your hand pieces, you have to buy your gravers, you have to buy your collets, you have to buy...
So everything's a la carte.
Yes, it is. Whereas this, and that's one of the things that's so cool about this machine, yes, it came with gravers. I still have all 6 of my gravers right here unopened.
Like, you're not going to be a professional graver all day.
Yeah,
You just want to add some initials to a piece.
Yes, and you want to know what?
A little bit of
I did beautiful bright cutting. beautiful bright cutting around my stones with this. That was my favorite thing about this machine. I was like, oh my gosh, if I did nothing but my bright cuts around my stones, this machine pays for itself. So yes, if you're just starting out, you've got a tight budget, you've got a tight space, you're gonna get a micromotor and an engraving machine, and you're gonna have the ability to do that. Is it the other machine? No, it's not. And I will never say that it even compares, right? There's gonna be differences. But like I said, I was still able to do what I do. I was still able to do beautiful flare cuts. I mean, you guys can come and look at these. Even these are beautiful cuts.
You engrave on the inside of the shank.
Same way that you would though with the others, like just how you mount it and you know how you kind of work inside of it. One of the things I absolutely hate, so I've done it like once.
So
I don't have that skill yet.
I used to work for a jeweler, we had like a machine.
Right,
Put it in and we would just trace the stencil.
right.
For the inside of the shanks. But
That's cheating, but yes. No, it's not cheating.
send it out
It's just
to
a different way.
hand engraver
Right.
to do it, but it was never deep enough and it always wore off.
Yes.
So it was like a trade-off, right?
Yeah. Well, and that's,
The inside of it.
you can. Yeah, you can. I mean, it's just like if you were to send it out to your hand engraver, it's still going to be the same, right? Like your hand engraver is still engraving with a graver.
Hand engraver is always a light touch, it's not as deep.
Okay.
It wear off like within.
And it just is going to depend on who does it. Like, if you look at this, and matter of fact, so I work under a microscope, and I think I have Grand Canyon deep engravings, and I pull it out and I look at it and I'm like, I like scratch the surface, but I watch that big old curl come off, but then you pull away from the microscope and your curl is like a hair. I'm like, oh, okay. So engraving is very rarely really deep to begin with. It can be. It certainly can be. And I'm heavy-handed, mine's deep, and I don't mean it to be a lot of times. Okay, but that again is just going to come with practice and you working on, you know, however you're going to push that. That's your technique, and that's whoever's technique. So, yes, you can get this deep on the inside of a shank even. Difficult, but you can do it. And like I said, at first I was not impressed with this machine. I was like, there's just no way. Because I almost, like I said, I met these guys last year at MJSA, and I was ready to give them my money, and then I tried it, and I'm like, mm-mm. And then I got one to review, and then spent the time with it, and I was like, okay, it's a fair machine. It does, it does. And like I said, if I had started with this machine, it would have been a dream machine. It would have been amazing because that was all I ever knew, right? And it would have been just fine. I can do beautiful flare cuts with it. I can do beautiful bright cuts with it. I can still drill my stones. I can still polish my pieces. It's lighter weight, so I can stall my handpiece if I'm polishing and I'm pushing. I can stall my handpiece if I'm drilling deep into a stone or deep into some metal, thick metal. It doesn't have the same kind of torque, right? But if I go slow and I work my way in through it, it takes a little longer, but it does it. It still does it. It still does the job, and it does it beautifully. So hopefully that helps if you guys are trying to decide on it or not. It's a great machine. For the price, $1,000, it's unbelievable for the price. To the Lindsay, again, there's really no comparison. Because again, that's such a different, it's a different class. With the Lindsay, you're working again, you're either going to work with a pressurized gas or you're going to work with a compressed air, right? So you're going to have more power just because of that. Plus the way that the piston is done in the Lindsay is different than the piston for this. And you don't get the micromotor, exactly. So, I mean, like I said, it's lovely for the fact, just the fact alone that you get the micromotor and the engraver, that alone is like a really cool feature because then you've got the both. And like I said, at my cabin, this is the perfect machine up there, except for the high elevation, kills my pressure. That's the only thing that I have up there. But I don't have an extra micromotor up at my cabin. I have this, and it works. You could work it out of your car. You can. Yeah, and that's the thing too, is this is perfect for those small studios. If you're in an apartment, if you're in a camper trailer, if you're in your car, right? If you take it to a show, like take it to a show and you can hand engrave your things right there. Put somebody's date, put somebody's initial or something like that. This I can tote around. My GRS, I can't tote that baby around, not like that. Right? There's nothing to it on this one. You stick it in a little box, which is what I do. I just get one of those little boxes, clear boxes, has the little lids that snap, like they're like this, but bigger. I just throw them into this and I tote them wherever I go. Super portable, super lightweight. Yeah, it's not bad at all.